The sun hung low over the colony, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. It was a quiet place, tucked away on the edge of space, far from the bustling cities of Earth and the conflicts of distant planets. People came here to start over, to escape the noise of civilization and find peace. For Jack, it was home. A home he had made alone, after leaving behind everything he once knew. He had always wanted to live a life of peace, away from the chaos of the universe. But that all changed one cold evening. Jack was working late in his small garden when he heard a faint cry, barely audible over the sounds of the wind. At first he thought it was just the wind itself playing tricks on his ears. But then he heard it again, a soft, pitiful sound, like that of a child in distress. He quickly dropped his gardening tools and rushed toward the noise, his heart racing. The sound led him to the edge of the small house he had built, where the dark shadows stretched long under the light of the setting sun. There, lying in the grass, was a small figure. A girl. She was no older than 6 or 7, with dark green skin that shimmered faintly in the dying light. Her hair was long and silver, shining like moonlight, and her eyes, wide, round, and filled with fear, were an intense shade of violet. She was trembling, covered in dirt and tears, her small hands reaching out as though seeking comfort. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He dropped to his knees beside her, instinctively pulling her into his arms. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered, his voice soft and comforting. "You're safe now." She only clung to him, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt as though he was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Jack could feel her rapid heartbeat against his chest, the fear still fresh in her. He looked around, but there was no one else in sight. No sign of where she had come from, or who had left her there. He gently stroked her hair, trying to calm her. "Where are you from?" Jack asked, but the girl remained silent. She didn't even seem to understand his language, though her eyes were full of understanding, of something, Jack wasn't sure what. He hesitated, unsure of what to do. He wasn't a father, but something about this girl pulled at his heart. He knew, in that moment, he couldn't just leave her here. She was alone, and whoever had left her didn't deserve to be called a parent. He picked her up, cradling her in his arms, and carried her inside his house. Jack had no idea what he was getting into, but he couldn't turn away from her. It wasn't in him to leave someone so vulnerable. The decision was made. She would stay. Inside, Jack set her down on his couch and went to fetch a blanket. He had little in the way of luxuries, but he could offer her warmth. She hadn't said a word since he found her, but her eyes never left him. As he wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, he saw her glance toward the window, her expression hardening for a moment before softening again. He sighed, feeling a bit out of his depth. His life had been quiet, too quiet, and this sudden change was both thrilling and terrifying. But she needed him, and for some reason, Jack felt a connection to her that he couldn't explain. Maybe it was just the need to protect, or maybe it was something more. Over the next few days, Jack did everything he could think of to make the girl feel safe. He fed her, clothed her, and found her a little corner in his home. She never spoke a word, but her eyes said everything. They spoke of a fear that Jack could only guess at. But they also spoke of gratitude, a kind of gratitude that melted his heart. He was her protector now, her father, even though neither of them had said the word. Despite everything, Jack found himself growing attached to her. He began to call her Leah, after his mother. He thought the name would help. It wasn't a name from her world, but Jack didn't know where she was from, and for now, it was enough. Leah seemed to accept the name, though she never responded to it in any way other than a soft nod. Days turned into weeks, and as the weeks passed, Jack's attachment to Leah only grew. He couldn't imagine life without her. His home felt warmer, more alive. She would sit by the window, staring out at the stars, her little face full of wonder and sadness. It was clear that the stars held some kind of meaning for her, but she never explained why. The colony around them remained quiet, but Jack felt the tension growing. There were whispers among the people, rumors that spread like wildfire. People had seen strange ships in the sky, ships that didn't belong to any of the known species in the galaxy. Jack wasn't concerned about the rumors at first. It was just gossip. But then, one evening, something changed. The sky was darkening, and Jack had just finished dinner when he heard the sound of engines in the distance. He walked outside to see a ship descending through the sky, low and fast, heading straight for the colony. His heart skipped. There was something about the way it moved, something familiar, and yet not quite right. He turned to look at Leah, who was standing at the window. Her violet eyes were wide, filled with something Jack couldn't read. Was it fear? Recognition? Suddenly, it hit him. This wasn't just some passing ship. This was her ship, the one she had been waiting for. The ship landed quietly, just outside the colony's boundary, and Jack's stomach dropped. He knew then that his peaceful life was over, that this was just the beginning of a story he hadn't prepared for. Whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. Leah stood, her hands shaking slightly as she moved toward the door. Jack was at her side in an instant, unsure of what to say or do. "Leah?" he asked, his voice low, unsure. She didn't turn to him. Instead, she looked up at him, her face set in a strange expression. "I have to go, Father," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "My mother has come." The quiet night had settled around Jack's home, but it was anything but peaceful. The strange ship that had landed outside the colony loomed in the distance, casting an eerie shadow under the fading light of the stars. Jack stood at the doorway, his hand on the frame, watching Leah as she stood in front of him. She was still as though she was trying to gather her thoughts, but the tension in her shoulders spoke of a deep, internal struggle. "Are you sure you want to go?" Jack's voice was thick with emotion, a lump in his throat that he couldn't swallow. He had raised her, loved her, protected her, and now she was about to leave. The thought of it made his chest tighten. Leah didn't respond right away. She kept her eyes focused on the dark sky, her small form barely visible in the dim light. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy. Jack could feel the weight of it pressing on him. He had never been a man of many words, but right now, he wished he had the right ones to make her stay, to make her want to stay. "I have to," Leah said, her voice soft but firm. "My mother? She's here. She's come to take me home." Her words were simple, yet they carried a heaviness that Jack hadn't expected. The realization hit him like a wave. This wasn't just about a reunion between a mother and her daughter. This was about something bigger, something Jack hadn't yet understood. Leah turned her head slightly to look at him, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. The words sent a sharp pang through Jack's heart. It was the first time she had ever called him father, and the sound of it made him realize just how deeply she had come to rely on him. The child who had arrived on his doorstep so frightened and alone was now his daughter in every sense of the word. Jack stepped forward, his heart swelling with love for her. He knelt down so that he was eye level with her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to leave, Leah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your father. I can protect you. You don't need anyone else." But Leah only shook her head, her silver hair shimmering in the dim light. "I have to go," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "It's my home. I have to be with her." She looked toward the ship again, her expression unreadable.
"I don't want to forget you, but she's my mother. I can't ignore her. I need to go."
Jack felt his heart break all over again. He had always known that one day she might have to leave, but that day had come far sooner than he had expected. It had been his hope that she would stay, that they would remain together, that their bond would be enough to keep her by his side. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The sound of the ship's engines hummed in the distance, growing louder as it seemed to draw closer, urging Leah toward the unknown. Jack stood up, trying to steady himself. He knew he had no right to stop her. She wasn't his by blood. He had raised her, loved her, but in the end, she belonged to someone else. "You'll come back, won't you?" Jack asked, his voice cracking with the weight of his fear. "You'll remember me, right?" Leah looked up at him, her violet eyes filled with sadness. "I will always remember you," she promised, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll always be my father." Jack nodded, but his throat tightened. He didn't want to let her go, didn't want to face the reality of a life without her. But the truth was clear. She was an alien, and this world was not her home. Her mother, whoever she was part of her past, a past Jack couldn't change, no matter how much he wanted to. The ship was closer now, its lights blinking in the darkness like a beacon. It was time. Jack could feel it in the air, a sense of finality that settled over him like a heavy blanket. "Go," Jack said softly, his voice barely a breath. "Go to her." "She's your mother." Leah hesitated for a moment longer, then slowly turned and walked toward the door. Jack watched her go, his heart aching with every step she took. The air around him felt cold, the emptiness in his chest growing with each passing second. He had never imagined this moment would come. Not like this. He had always thought he would be enough for her, that he could fill the role of both father and protector. But he hadn't realized how much of her heart still belonged to the world she came from. When Leah reached the doorway, she stopped and looked back at him one last time. Jack could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She didn't speak either, just gave him one last, lingering look before stepping out into the night. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Jack was left standing alone in the quiet, darkened house. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines as it powered up, ready to take her away. He stayed there for a long time, unmoving, staring at the spot where Leah had stood just moments ago. He could still feel the warmth of her small body in his arms, the softness of her skin against his. He could still hear her voice in his mind, calling him father. But now, that voice seemed far away, like a dream he couldn't quite reach. He walked to the window and looked out at the sky, at the ship that was slowly lifting off the ground, its lights flickering as it ascended into the stars. He couldn't stop the tears that started to fall, but he didn't try to wipe them away. This was part of the process. This was part of letting go. Leah was gone, and Jack was left with nothing but the memories of a little girl who had once called him father. Days passed after Leah's departure, but Jack's heart remained heavy. The house, once filled with her laughter and her quiet presence, now felt empty. The air was still and thick with silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you, reminding you of everything you've lost. Jack found himself standing in the same spots he had stood before, by the window, in the garden, at the small table where they used to eat together, but this time, there was no one beside him. The quiet felt like a weight he couldn't shake off. He had tried to distract himself with work, fixing things around the house, maintaining the garden, but nothing seemed to make a difference. The evenings stretched on endlessly, and Jack often found himself staring at the stars, wondering where Leah was, if she was safe, if she was happy. He missed her terribly, but there was nothing he could do. She was with her mother now, and it was clear that she had made her choice. He wasn't angry with her. He didn't even feel betrayed. He just felt lost. A week passed, then two. Jack kept to himself, rarely speaking to anyone in the colony. The people there were friendly, but Jack didn't feel like talking. He knew they all understood what had happened, but they didn't really know. They couldn't understand how much he had loved Leah, how much she had meant to him. How could they? One evening, as Jack sat outside watching the sunset, he heard the soft whir of engines in the distance. His heart skipped a beat. It was a sound he hadn't heard since the day Leah left, the sound of a ship coming in for a landing. At first he thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him, but then the sound grew louder, and Jack stood up, his pulse quickening. The ship was small, just like the one that had taken Leah away, but this one was moving faster, more urgently. It descended through the evening sky, landing just outside the boundary of the colony. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he found himself walking toward it before he even realized it. His legs moved on their own, carrying him through the fading light, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. As he approached, the ship's engines powered down, and the hatch opened. Jack stopped, his breath catching in his throat as a figure stepped out. It wasn't Leah. It wasn't her mother either. The woman who stood before him was tall, with sharp features and a regal air that was hard to ignore. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, and her eyes glowed faintly with a soft amber light. She was dressed in a flowing robe, the fabric shimmering as though it was made of something far beyond anything Jack had ever seen. The woman looked at him with a calm expression, her eyes studying him carefully. She didn't speak right away, but Jack could sense the weight of her presence. She was someone important, someone who held power. "Jack," she said finally, her voice smooth and melodic, like the hum of a distant melody. Her tone was not threatening, but there was a certain authority in it that made Jack tense. "You've raised my daughter well." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. His mind scrambled to process what she had just said. Leah's mother? "Your daughter?" Jack repeated, his voice shaky. He hadn't expected anyone to come looking for him. He hadn't expected anyone to come back. "You're Leah's mother?" The woman nodded, slowly. "Yes, I am. My name is Vera." Jack didn't know what to say. He was stunned, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected visitor. He had no idea who this woman was, but there was something in the way she carried herself that made it clear she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. "I've come to speak with you," Vera continued, her gaze never leaving Jack, "to explain why it is necessary for my daughter to remain with me." Jack swallowed hard. He had thought about this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, he was at a loss for words. The woman standing before him wasn't just any alien. She was powerful. Someone with a connection to the galaxy, to worlds beyond anything Jack could understand. And she was here for Leah. He glanced over his shoulder at the empty house. The silence pressed down on him again, reminding him of just how much had changed in the last few days. His life had been turned upside down, and now this woman, Leah's real mother, was here to explain things he didn't understand. "I don't understand," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought she was with you. Why did she come to me? Why did she stay with me all this time?" Vera sighed, her expression softening ever so slightly. "Because, Jack, she needed you. You gave her something I couldn't. I've spent years searching for her. Years. The galaxy is a vast and dangerous place. I couldn't protect her the way you could. You raised her in a way that I could not. I am grateful for that. But now the time has come for her to return home. There are things she must learn, things she must understand, and I am the only one who can teach her." Jack shook his head, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I'm her father now," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've raised her. She's my daughter. She belongs with me." Vera's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them that Jack couldn't ignore. "I know you love her, and I know you want what is best for her. But you cannot keep her. You are human, Jack, and she is not. She is part of something much larger than this world, than this life you've given her. I know it's difficult, but you must understand. Her place is with me. It always has been." Jack felt as though the ground beneath him had just been pulled away. He had always known that Leah wasn't his by blood. He had always known that she had a past, a life before him. But hearing the words spoken so plainly, so matter-of-factly, made the reality feel so much more real. "And what happens to me?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to someone like me? I can't just forget about her." Vera's expression softened. "You won't be forgotten, Jack. I promise you that. You are her father in every way that matters. She will never forget you. She will carry you with her, always." But Jack wasn't sure that was enough. He wasn't sure that promises could fill the void she had left in his life. He didn't know if he could stand by and watch her walk away again, knowing she was never really his to keep. "I don't want her to go," Jack said, his voice breaking. Vera took a step closer, her eyes gentle. "I understand. And it is not easy for me either. But this is something that cannot be avoided. The galaxy has its own way of working, and we must follow it." Jack looked at the woman before him, her calm demeanor contrasting so sharply with the storm of emotions inside him. He wasn't sure if he could accept this, if he could just let go of the little girl who had become his world. But he had no choice. Leah had made her choice, and so had he. "Will I ever see her again?" Jack asked quietly. "Dad!" Vera nodded. "I believe you will. But it will not be for some time. She must understand who she is, and that journey will take her far from here." Jack nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure he could accept it. Still, there was a part of him that knew this was the right thing for Leah. She was not meant to stay here forever in this quiet corner of the galaxy. She had a destiny beyond anything Jack could offer her. He just had to learn to live with that. Vera gave him one last look, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of understanding and sorrow. "Take care, Jack," she said softly, "and know that she will always remember you." As she turned and walked back toward the ship, Jack stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling the weight of her words settling over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Leah would always be a part of him. No matter how far away she went, no matter how different their worlds were, she would always be his daughter. And for that, he was grateful. The days that followed were some of the hardest Jack had ever faced. His world felt like it had been shattered, and the pieces were too scattered to put back together. He spent his time alone, avoiding contact with the other colonists. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate their concern. It was just that he couldn't find the words to explain what he was going through. How could anyone understand the emptiness he felt? How could they know the pain of losing a child, even if that child wasn't his by blood? Jack would wake up in the mornings, his thoughts heavy, and walk around the house aimlessly. There were so many things he had planned to do with Leah. There were so many memories they had yet to make. He had dreamed of teaching her how to fix things around the house, showing her the stars through the small telescope he had bought for them both. He had imagined watching her grow, helping her navigate the world she was born into, teaching her the things he had learned over the years. But those dreams seemed to have evaporated, leaving only a quiet and still void where once there was life. One evening, as Jack sat on the porch of the house, watching the stars in the sky, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. He knew who it was. The figure stopped beside him, but still, Jack didn't turn his head.
"You've been avoiding everyone." Vera's voice broke through the silence, calm, but carrying a hint of concern.
Jack's gaze remained fixed on the stars. "I don't know what to say." Vera sat down beside him, her movements graceful, almost ethereal. Her presence was different from everyone else in the colony. There was an air about her that made everything feel distant, as if she came from a place far removed from this quiet, dusty world. Jack had always known that Leah's mother was powerful, but it wasn't until now, sitting next to her, that he fully realized the weight of her presence. She had an energy that seemed to hum in the air around her, something unspoken but felt nonetheless. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," Vera continued, her voice softer now. "I didn't want to take her away from you." Jack finally turned his head, meeting her gaze for the first time since their first encounter. "You didn't have a choice, did you?" His words were sharp, but there was no malice in them. Just a deep sadness. Vera's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. "No, I didn't. It was always going to come to this. But that doesn't make it any easier." Jack sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. He had so many questions. Questions that had been nagging at him ever since Vera had come into his life, but now he didn't know where to begin. He had so many things he needed to understand, so many things he needed to know. And yet, the most important question remained unanswered. Why did it hurt so much? Why did the ache in his chest feel so unbearable? "What happens to her now?" Jack asked, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "What does she do now that she's with you?" Vera leaned back, her gaze turning toward the stars above them. "There is much she must learn. She is more than just a child of this world, Jack. She's the key to something much larger than either of us can fully understand. Her future is tied to a destiny she must fulfill. It's not something I can explain all at once, but I will tell you this. She is not alone. She has me, and she has the people who will help her learn what she needs to know." Jack's heart sank at the thought. He could feel the distance between them widening even further, as though their worlds were becoming more and more separate with every passing moment. "Will she ever remember me?" Jack asked, his voice cracking just slightly. "Will she ever come back? Will I see her again?" Vera was silent for a long time, and Jack almost didn't want to hear her answer. He wasn't sure he could bear the thought of Leah forgetting him, of their time together being nothing more than a distant memory. "I don't know," Vera said, her voice low and thoughtful. "I cannot promise you what the future holds. I wish I could. But I will say this, Leah is strong, and I believe in her heart she will always carry a piece of you with her. Your bond will not be erased, Jack. Not by distance, not by time." Jack nodded, though his heart felt heavy with uncertainty. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all he had. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, watching the stars together, each lost in their own thoughts. The quiet of the night was comforting in its own way, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers, something precious that he couldn't hold on to. It was a feeling that had haunted him since Leah had first left, and it lingered in the pit of his stomach, like a shadow he couldn't escape. Finally, Vera stood up, her robe flowing around her like liquid silver. "I should go." "I know this has been difficult for you, Jack, but I want you to know that I do not take what you've done lightly. You've given her more than I ever could in these last few years." Jack looked up at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I just want her to be happy," he said quietly. "I just want her to be safe." Vera nodded, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer before she turned to leave. "She will be. I will make sure of that." Jack watched her walk toward the ship, his mind still racing with thoughts and questions. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget Leah, and he would never stop hoping that one day, somehow, they would find their way back to each other. The ship lifted off into the sky, its engines humming softly as it disappeared into the distance. Jack stood there for a long time after, not moving, just watching the stars. The emptiness in his chest was still there, but it wasn't as sharp now. Maybe it never would be. But he knew he had done the right thing, even if it didn't feel that way. He had loved her, and he had let her go. That was the hardest thing he had ever done, But it was also the most selfless thing he could have done. And in the end, that was all he could offer her.